I'm going to be talking about productivity and developer productivity in specific, and how you can boost it in a very easy way. My name is Hugo. I'm part of the Red Hat developer team doing developer advocacy, everything related with developers and our Red Hat portfolio, from Linux for developers, containers, development, API management, and so on. And here's my contact information if you want to follow the conversation in X, previously known as Twitter, or LinkedIn, or any other kind of social network. I'm happy to engage. So we were talking about developer productivity. This is one of the things that are really getting into the developer space, this notion of 10x engineer, so how you can start to be more productive, reduce cost, accelerate the time to market, being able to deliver software as soon as possible. And sometimes this is getting complicated. And if you're doing GraphQL, it can also be a challenge. But if you're doing GraphQL or in general APIs, there's one technique that I can help you out with to make you look more productive to your business, to your team, to your manager. And if you want to take something from this chat, it's actually this: fake it until you make it. And this is a very good approach in the sense that faking things in the way of using mocks can help us out to be and look more productive. How come? Well, the challenges with APIs and in general distributed systems is that we need to be able to share pieces of information through maybe microservices or different services through exposing our APIs. And there's certain challenges, like, for example, we want to shorten the loopback, the feedback loop, because we want to know if something is working or not, if you're receiving the information you're expecting or not. If we do that after we have developed all our code, we have launched and released, then that loop is going to take too long for us to be able to react and deliver the results. So we want to parallelize these developments. So if I'm developing the code that is going to be, querying the database for the team that is presented that in the UI, if we can start working together and not, having these dependencies on each other, will help us to be more productive. And obviously, validate our implementations, because you don't want to mess with the business, right? So the business is the black belts of the organization. If they want something, they will need to have it. And we do have different other teams. We don't have the same level as business. Business, it's the biggest one, the gorilla in the room. But we can certainly be able to agree with the business while developing our front end and our back end, right? So we can have then a way to say, I'm going to build this, I'm going to be showing this, and this needs to be compliant with what the business is telling us that they want to have. So it is important to always have a way to be aligned with the business. And this is where things like schemas and types and validations become the new rules, the new contracts that we need to follow and to adhere as part of our development of distributed applications. So schemas and types. The good thing is that if we're talking about APIs and GraphQL in specific, we are focusing on those, right? So we do have the schema that will certainly help us to define, these kind of contracts where I, as the backend, guarantee that you will receive certain fields with certain structure, and you will be able to consume from the front end or from any other kind of integration. So here is a question for you. And maybe you can help out me scanning the QR code, or if you don't trust the QR code, you can just go directly to the link over there and ingress the number. I want to know how you are building your schemas for GraphQL. There are a couple of options. Maybe you're using an IDE plugin, or you're using an online editor that will help you out build your schemas. Or maybe you're generating those schemas from code, so code-first approach or API design first. Or maybe you're using no tooling, and it's like getting BI or Emacs, and then start coding your schema, right? For something easy, it might work, but some things more complicated might be a challenge. So yeah, most of us don't use the tooling for that because there's a lack of tooling in this space that helps us with managing schemas. So thank you for your contribution there. The important about contracts and schemas is that not only tell us what is the structure of the response and the contract that we are going to be fulfilling, but if we are adding also the topic of examples to those schemas, then we can start to get something more interesting to be able to share with our team. So most of the times when you're thinking about examples for those schemas, those are generated examples. Like, yeah, I need an integer, and then the example is 1, 2, 3, 4. I need a string, and the string is string. Those kind of examples can be useful for just having the shape of the object, of the business object that we're going to be sending. But if I send that example to the business black belt, they will certainly not be happy. It's like, what is string? What is 1, 2, 3, 4? It's not a business object that we want to show. So instead of having those auto-generated examples, what we want to do is get something like a real-life kind of example. It can be coming from live data, or can be generated by AI now. Actually, AI is generating very good examples for our schemas. And the idea is that it also will help us to easily share that with business. They will understand that when you're saying name, there's an actual real name that looks like a name and not just a string. If you're using a number, it really looks like a part number or maybe a value object and so on. And this will certainly help us to do and achieve certain things, like mocks and tests, that will certainly help us automate some of these examples. In the GraphQL part, one of the challenges is that if you want to handle mocks, even the official documentation of solutions like Apollo or other servers tell you, well, if you want to do mock, guess what? You need to code. You need to throw lines of code. You need to get into Node.js and start working with that. Sometimes it works because if you are already doing that, it's helpful. But I think there's a better way to do that. And remember, we're talking about productivity. So how can I get some mocking service and stops working on my schema with my examples without coding? Well, look, I want to try to do this this mocking without coding. And for that, certainly one of the challenges that I have is that the schema does not have a holder for examples. So what we can do is try to complete that space of examples using secondary artifacts or dependencies. In our case, we can use something like Postman to be able to link the schema from my GraphQL queries and mutations, and then being able to show some examples of how the payload looks when you are accessing each one of those queries. So we have our GraphQL schema, and we have Postman as a secondary artifact. And then there's some tooling that can help us work with that. In my case, I'm going to show you one tool that is part of the CNCF Foundation called Microx. It's an open source project available for providing a set of toolings focusing on mocking on different kind of APIs, as well as contract testing if you want to go a bit further and being able to assure that obviously there's no drift between what you're implementing and what the contract that you have been working on. It helps you turn your specification or your examples into live mocks. That's the demo that we're going to see today. But also, as I was saying, helps you out to make sure that your endpoint is compliant with that schema, right? Validation of the types of the schemas that you are defining, as well as from live data that is coming from your actual implementation. So let's do some magic and show you how this works. So in my case, I have a service. I have this application running. It runs as a Docker container, as a Docker extension. And what I have here is I have a schema that I will be working with. So here I have just created a GraphQL schema. I'm adding some metadata because the schema is not supporting this. I'm adding this a comment saying I'm going to have an identifier for Microx that I'm going to call it Movie Graph API. and I have a version, so we can handle versioning on this. I have a schema. If you look, this is a very simple example schema for films, films connection, reviews, and a query that will return all films or a film, as well as some mutations if you want to add content. So this GraphQL, I have just loaded into the system. So I just import that document. It's very easy. There are different ways to achieve that. And the next thing that I need to do is load this into my Postman collection. So I just added my movie graph that has the same mutations, a start, a review, and all films. The interesting part here is that as this was populated from the schema, one of the things that I can do is add some responses, or in this case, some examples for those responses. And I have a query here, just defining, coming from the specification. And what I'm adding is just the data that can be, returned as part of this query. One of the things that tools like Macros can do is that they can use these functions for data generation. So instead of saying, oh, the start count is 25, I can use a random function to be able to change that number into a value between 0 and 500. I can also use that for generating names, street address, emails, UIDs, if you want to have something that makes it a mock more dynamic. Now that I have this, I can export this as one of the Postman collections. So I can do a collection, I can do export, and then I can add into and export into my my repo, and then I can load this information, use an importer, upload. The interesting thing here is that we need to select this as a secondary artifact, meaning that what it will do is it will complement the API that I've already loaded and deploy these examples as part of the API. So if I go into the API, I can get information about the Postman collection, the schema that was loaded, and I have the operations here. And as you can see, I have one sample for all films. I just implemented that one, and it has the information that I have here on the different films that I'm going to be able to showcase. Now, with this running on Microx, I already get endpoint, a mock URL that I can use for querying my system, my server, and I can do a test using Postman. So I have a test that is going to be doing a post into my service using this same URL, port 8280, GraphQL, movie graph, and a version. And if I do send this information with my information about total count, films, ID, title, start count, I see that the information that is being returned as part of my query, well, shows me this specific data. If I do run again, I see that the start count for A New Hope, the Star Wars movie, just changed. Good value, Return of the Jedi 5. Well, maybe not, that was not so real. I think it was better than that. But you can see that the numbers are changing with each one of the requests, so you can have these dynamic demogs, but still being able to check this. If you only want to have the total count, you can just do a change on the query, and you will get the result that is different in this case for each one of the queries. So. As you can see, you can also add more examples, add stars, a review, and being able to build more complex solutions for your schemas. You can modify the amount of data. You can tweak your request. So if you have a specific query, you can return a specific data in case you want to do something more complex. So it's great, right? We can now have our mocking service without having to modify it or add any code into my application. So key takeaways on mocking. Well, if you are able to do mocking, you will be able to ease the collaboration with other teams. So you will be saying, OK, you can start working with your front-end implementation using this contract. You will be able to foster and have rapid feedback. So if businesses see some examples, say, no, this is not what we're expecting, change it, you can do it easily, quickly, before you start throwing in a line of code. It helps you using this kind of solutions to be able to have other kind of solutions and API complementation if you're just using REST or GraphQL. So you can do continuous validation on these topics. So one interesting thing about the solution that I was showing is that it's not just for GraphQL. You can use it but for basically all kind of APIs, from SOAP services to OpenAPI, following the same kind of solution. Have a contract, have examples, and then being able to validate those, including a sync API. So if you want to, test Kafka, you want to mock a SNS endpoint, you can do that with this. There are more resources. As I was saying, this was running on a centralized application, but you can use it as part of your testing, using test containers. You can use it as part of your CI/CD process, using GitHub Actions, desktop pipelines. So as we were saying before, the automation of your release process can help you also out to be able to fulfill these challenges for mocking your GraphQL endpoint, as well as do the contract testing. So remember, you can fake it until you can make it. So thank you very much.